Winter in a poor medieval home was not a picturesque scene of cozy hearths. For most peasants, fuel was scarce, expensive, or simply unavailable at the end of a hard season. A small hut built from timber, wattle, and clay could not hold heat the way modern walls do, and every crack acted like a thin knife of air. The cold came from every direction. Under the door, through uneven planks, around a shutter, along the edge where daub had crumbled away. Night turned the interior into a refrigerator of damp earth and stone. People did not talk about comfort. They talked about enduring until morning, because hunger and cold often arrived together. The first defense was not fire, but blocking moving air and building layers. Straw was cheap and everywhere, so it became bedding, insulation, and filler. A straw mattress lifted the body away from frozen ground, while linen against skin reduced the bite of scratchy wool and helped keep sweat from chilling the body. Peasants used every textile they owned. Patched blankets, heavy throws, worn cloaks, and crude curtains hung around the bed to trap a pocket of warmer air. Curtains were not decoration, they were a wall made of cloth. In a single room where a whole family lived, the sleeping corner became the only place where warmth could be accumulated and held. Even these measures carried their own kind of hardship. Straw produced dust and itch, wool rubbed skin raw, and dampness crept into everything. People slept closer together because a second body was a heat source that did not need to be purchased. The bed moved away from doors and windows and into corners, where drafts were weaker. Every action was practical. Tie a cap to keep heat from the head, tuck sheets to reduce air gaps, hang cloth on the wall, wedge rags into seams. The goal was simple and brutal: reduce heat loss long enough for exhausted bodies to recover before the next day of labor. When the wind sharpened and temperatures dropped further, medieval peasants relied on stored warmth rather than burning wood they did not have. The hearth might hold only ash and a few dim embers buried under it, saved like a last coin. Stone and brick near the hearth absorbed what little heat remained, and people used that heat indirectly. A warmed brick wrapped in cloth, a heated stone carried into bed, or a small lidded container holding embers could take the edge off the worst cold. These were not luxuries, they were survival tools. The room stayed cold, but the bed could be turned into a small heat chamber. Air management mattered as much as blankets. A lidded brazier with vent holes could release gentle warmth without open flame, while smoke and stale air were guided upward through roof vents to avoid suffocation and to keep the sleeping space from filling with fumes. Draft stoppers sealed the bottom edges of curtains, turning fabric into a barrier against cold air sliding along the floor. Bolsters filled empty space so the body did not have to warm a large volume of air. Rushes and mats reduced dampness underfoot. Wall hangings, even crude sackcloth, added a dead air layer against cold surfaces. Every object was repurposed. Trunks and chests were pushed near the bed to block circulating air and to add mass that warmed slowly and cooled slowly. Extreme cold also meant visible suffering, even while people did everything correctly. Breath fogged inside the curtains. Fingers stiffened, skin cracked, and sleep became shallow because shivering was work. Children and adults curled tightly to reduce exposed surface area, and quilts were pressed flat to remove gaps where cold air could creep in. The only reliable heat came from bodies and from careful insulation. The room did not become warm, it became slightly less deadly. The middle of the night was a test of materials, planning, and endurance, where a small mistake in sealing a crack could mean hours of shaking cold. As night gave way to dawn, the cold often felt worse, not better. Embers faded, the hut's stored warmth thinned, and weak daylight did nothing to raise indoor temperatures. People woke with aching joints and numb hands, and the first moments outside the blankets could be shocking. The goal at daybreak was to keep whatever heat remained from escaping too quickly. Curtains were opened only slightly, blankets were folded and stored to stay dry, and bedding was reshaped to remain ready for the next night. In a poor household, there was no reset button and no plentiful fuel to start fresh. Every day began with the reality that the next night would require the same struggle. The last defenses were structural and logistical rather than dramatic. Raising the bed a little, blocking underdrafts with hay and cloth, compacting the earth floor, and laying down mats created small but meaningful differences. Hanging extra cloth from beams reduced the air volume that needed warming. Whitewashed plaster and fresh daub closed microcracks that fed drafts. Chests and trunks were positioned like movable walls to stop wind pathways. These choices show a practical intelligence born from necessity. They were not trying to create comfort, they were trying to create a survivable microclimate around a bed in a single, crowded room. By the time the household fully rose, the signs of deprivation were everywhere. Worn textiles, rough repairs, and a hearth without fuel. The methods worked only by stacking small advantages. Fewer drafts, more layers, tighter bedding, shared body heat, and stored warmth in stone, sand, or wrapped vessels. The historical reality behind these scenes is not romantic. Extreme cold meant sickness, exhaustion, and sometimes death, especially among the very young and the very old. Sleeping warm without firewood was not a clever trick. It was a daily practice of sealing, layering, and enduring, repeated through long winters by people who could not afford any other solution.